Bienvenidos to Cafecitos Mano Mano. I'm Fanny Lora. Grab your cafecito and meet the people behind the music. Today we're going to talk with Laura Intravia. She's an arranger and composer. Hi Laura, how are you?
Hi, Fanny. I'm doing great. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me as a part of this project.
Of course. What are you drinking?
I am drinking my go-to green tea in my gamer mug, featuring The Legend of Zelda, one of my favorite games. But I am huge into green tea. It is my favorite thing to start the morning off with.
Wow. So, Laura, to begin today, I just want to hear a little bit about your background and your role in Mano a Mano Arias in dialogue.
Yeah, Fanny and I are old classmates. We went to undergrad together at Ithaca College, and in the past, several years of my career, I've been mostly working in video game soundtracks as a recording artist for vocals on, various composers' soundtracks and things like that. But I've also, I've always had a love for, art song and recital. That was kind of my thing when I was, still predominantly in the classical music world. That was where my heart really lied. And I've also done a lot of work as an arranger and orchestrator in video games and in other contexts, arranging for different types of ensembles and reducing large scale works into smaller ensembles. So when Fanny contacted me about this project, about essentially, reducing works that were maybe originally for large orchestras and reducing it down to a smaller format, it was super in my wheelhouse. And even though I had not been familiar with many of these arias before, I knew I wanted to dive in and to learn something new from arranging them and familiarize myself with new music that I hadn't come across before. So.
That's awesome that, of course, I reached out to you and asked if you were interested, but also that the interest was greater because you didn't know a lot of this music. And I think that's the service in doing, concert work that is new and thematic like that, that we all benefit from getting to know new music. So
Mhm.
thank you for that and for being a kindred spirit.
Oh, of course. No, 100%. I love learning new things. Like anytime I take a project, if there's an opportunity for me to expand my horizon a little bit more and learn more about it. And when you had said Hispanic arias, I had to do a double take. I was like, does she mean Spanish language? No, she means like this particular heritage. And that was something I had never actually explored before. And it was a really educational experience for me. I really can't thank you enough for.
That's the whole point, to spread the wealth and also to let people know that it's rich. It's a rich world of classical music
Mhm.
in Hispanic culture and Spanish.
Mhm.
They're connected, and just letting people know that it exists and
Mhm.
setting it up, arranging it in a way that people are interested. You know,
Mhm.
and that was the
Yeah.
whole point of putting them mano a mano, side by side, hand in
Mhm.
hand with the standard repertoire. So,
Mhm.
what was your approach in arranging these pieces?
In my main career, mostly arranging video game music, I used all of the same steps to approach this. I look up information about the, where the song or the game, is first from, and what is the context for its existence, when did it come out, that kind of helps me get a window into, if this is, for example, a game from the 90s or something, that's going to put me in a certain frame of mind for what the type of composition was during that time. Same thing for the arias. If it was written during this time, it's from this, um, genre is not the word I'm looking for, like style of operatic composition or, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So I always look up the information. Um, and then the next step is I listen to as many versions of it as I can find on, YouTube or, Spotify, to hear the different interpretations of the music, to identify what elements of the music are consistent in every performance that feels like that is, and for lack of a better term, an iconic part of the music, that it would be a shame to lose it, or it would make it unrecognizable to lose it.
Mhm.
And also to hear the little differences that different performers or arrangers, there were a lot of arrangements, for example, of Jose Maria, that I looked up a bunch of different versions, and I tried to find large scale orchestrated versions of songs if I could, and then the smallest possible orchestration, like just a guitar. like not even a singer, just a guitar, just to hear what parts that instrumentalist heard in the song that they wanted to draw out of it. And from listening to all of them, I take various notes about what I observed in each one, because the goal here is not to, knock off somebody else's work, or rip off another person's idea, but to just see what they felt they could inject into the music that was new. Because not being a Hispanic person or a Spanish speaking person, I also wanted to be sensitive to the elements of the style that felt like it was important to be there stylistically, in terms of, all of that. So I would also try to look up, classical Spanish guitarists specifically, people that would have been growing up with this kind of music, to hear like what do they hear in the music, having grown up with it, that has to stay, and trying to capture that feeling in my own interpretation of it.
That's huge. And to hear that the amount of investigation research that you do is so interesting, because I think a lot of audience members don't think about music being researched in that way,
Mm,
so that we can translate it into affect and articulation and tempo and all these things that we do musically kind of intuitively in our
hmm
music of origin, but
hmm
that we have to travel a little bit further in investigation for other cultures. And I'm so glad that you,
100%.
yeah, brought that up. And
hmm
also, while you're not Hispanic, I was very interested in working with you because you're a woman. And I
hmm
think, representation is huge, so
hmm
important. But also, I knew your work from, college, and I trusted you. And I think those elements are very important for collaborating, and
hmm
to learn that you feel, like you also gain so much from it. It makes me
hmm
really happy. Um, and how did you retain some of that folklore and timbre when you were arranging this for a chamber ensemble of
hmm
voice, piano, guitar, violin, and percussion? Percussion being
hmm
like castanets and cajon in this.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are two main things that I do when I'm trying to approach something like this, and one of them, from arranging for is gonna. I promise that this will connect in a second. I do a lot of arranging for like volunteer wind ensembles, which is like a very different instrumentation from what we're looking at right now, right?
Yeah.
Lots of horns, but when I'm arranging for those groups, my concern is the accessibility, but also the fun of the performance, because in those volunteer contexts, these people are playing for fun. Like, this is not about like high art necessarily. They want to have a good time playing their instrument. So it's important to not neglect one instrument, in favor of another, just because, like, I'm a woodwind player, for example, and woodwinds are more flexible. They can get around more easily. It's very tempting to want to give them the melody. They'll be able to play it like 100% of the time. But what about the trombones or the tuba? Instruments that can very easily fall by the wayside and get boring parts where they're just playing, just the root tonic the whole time. And they don't have an interesting time with the music. And I also think as a result, the music itself suffers, because I'm not being very creative anymore. If I'm just assuming the guitar will just comp, like they will just play chords the whole time, that's not very interesting for the guitar player, and that's also not very interesting for the audience who's going to be listening to it, because there is not a variation of the instrumentation happening. There's not something like a development happening musically just in this small ensemble. If we keep every instrument in its sort of traditional purpose, like violin is the melody, guitar is the comping, the piano just plays chords. I try to vary those things as much as I can, so that we're switching roles, and the ensemble has to listen to each other a little bit more. Now everyone's connecting, because they really have to focus on, how is my part functioning in this moment of the piece? How is it functioning in this other moment of the piece? To give everybody a rewarding experience, and as a result, I think the audience gets a more rewarding experience. So I'm always concerned about that. When it comes to preserving, sorry, run your question by me one more time. I got off in the weeds a bit.
No, it's a beautiful answer, and I was wondering about how you preserved the timbre or the
Mm,
folkloric,
yes.
melodic things or articulations that tell you this is a Hispanic heritage piece,
Hmm.
They're going from a full orchestra to a
Hmm.
chamber ensemble. You know.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes I get off on one track. So, I employ this thing I call vibes-based orchestration, which is just if I'm listening to the original piece, for example, the ballad, the Estrellita, I
Rajita.
forget.
Yeah.
Yes. So that one was actually the most challenging to me because there's so much space in the piece. There is not, for example, in Yo Soy Maria, it has that rhythm that we know, bump 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 bump. Like that's a classic rhythm, right?
Yes.
If you put that in there, it's going to feel a certain way
Mhm.
right away. But in the ballad, there's a lot more space, so I can't just rely on the, like, let's call it a trope, of that style. I don't have that trope available to me, so I have to find something else that will harken back to it. So, if in the original, for example, and I listened to a bunch of as many recordings as I could find of this one, and the orchestration is always like wildly different.
Yeah.
um, if let's say there was a part where I don't know the flutes took the melody, but I don't have a flute available to me. How does a flute function would be the question I ask myself. It's like they are flexible, they are light and airy, they are effortless. If the melody was in the trumpet, it would not feel effortless necessarily anymore. It would feel very powerful. It would have a lot of weight to it.
Mhm.
So then I go to my smaller ensemble and I say, what instruments in this ensemble can retain the feeling of the vibe of effortlessness, right? I have a violin. That's an easy crossover, right?
Mhm.
But I also have the guitar. When the guitar is playing, that can feel very effortless, and it can also draw the people in because the notes aren't, sustaining for as long. So that would be a more intimate version of effortlessness, whereas the violin is a little bit more romantic. So I'm using very generic terms that,
Mhm.
this isn't the sort of thing that your orchestration teacher would say to you when teaching you about the instruments in the orchestra. But I think when it comes to reducing something down, and especially trying to retain a particular part of, like, an indigenous style of music, or at the very least, some sort of performance practice, you have to think about what the vibe is that they're creating and use your instruments to achieve the same vibe as best as you can, and still keeping in mind that you want to try to vary things as much as possible. So for the piano, like if we're, effortless, let's go back to the effortless, lightness.
Mhm.
If we're playing in the middle of the piano, that's a little warmer. But if we
Mhm.
move it to the top of the piano, it's the same notes, but just the range changed the feeling of it. Now it's going to be a little sparklier, it's going to be a little bit lighter. So those are the sorts of questions I ask myself when I'm working on material like this.
Yeah, so it feels like the compositional work that you do is very, you challenge yourself. You
Mm.
don't try to stay in your comfort zone, and I think that's really brave,
Oh, thank
especially
you.
yeah, especially also with people trying to compose with AI and all of that. What you have been talking about really hits to the heart of why we have to retain this human-based
Hmm.
compositional styles,
Hmm.
because all the things that you've talked about are things that humans know. You
Hmm.
have the historical context and the
Hmm.
affect and the experience of being a singer, a multi instrumentalist, and arranger composer, which gives you a lot of nuance. And I
Hmm.
think that's something that humans need to retain.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that's to finish off. I have like
Mhm.
a fun lightning round. So here we go.
Okay, I'm ready.
Coffee or tea?
Definitely tea. I love coffee flavored things, but I can't do coffee itself.
That's so funny. Morning or night person?
Ooh, I think I'm a morning person. I like the sun being out.
Yeah, you look pretty awake to me.
I'm doing good.
Sweet or salty?
Ooh, I'm a sweet person. I like to bake, and it's mostly sweet.
Okay. And one word to describe this project, Mano a Mano Arias in Dialogue.
Definitely educational. Yep, I learned a lot. 100%.
And what's your go-to pre-rehearsal snack?
Ooh. Hmm. The correct answer would be a banana, but the actual answer is Trader Joe's brand's chocolate covered pretzels.
I love it.
I can go
We
through a
can have
bag in an
both.
hour.
You're not the first musician to tell me they like chocolate just before, you know? The pretzel
It's an
part,
energy boost.
yeah. Now, one word that describes you as an artist today.
Ooh, I think I would have to say I think I'd have to say versatile. Like I am constantly wearing a lot of different hats, or at least trying to. So I think that's where I'm at, is that I'm trying to learn as many things as I can. So yeah, I would say versatile, or at least I hope.
I love it. So thank you so much for being with us, Laura, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and update you and all the performances for this wonderful concert program that we're looking forward to performing in
Oh, thank you
2025.
so much. Yeah, I'm so excited about it. Thank you again for having me on board and for putting this together. It was great to catch up with you.
My pleasure.